Ideal Protein is a doctor-designed, coach-led ketogenic weight loss protocol that uses food as medicine to empower you to lose weight and live your healthiest life.
And welcome back to Group Therapy, a podcast brought to you by Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us today. We are a full group again, back together. I think last week was our first full week back after Mr. David Gray took some vacation. I know Mr. Rob has got one coming up probably in July, usually when sports slow down. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We're going to start on the viewer's left, my left as well.
Hey, this is Rob DeArmond. I'm the sports editor here at the Livingston Parish News.
And on my right,
I'm David Gray, lifestyle editor with the Livingston Parish News.
And today we've got kind of a whirlwind show. Not a whole lot of things we're going to go real crazy in depth with, but first few things I do want to mention to folks, please be weather aware. There is a formation in the Gulf. It's about 90% chance of it hitting tropical status. Right now, the big concern, of course, is major rains, so please keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the Weather Channel and be looking out for your local alerts.
And it's Wednesday. There is an air quality alert in place for South Louisiana. So they're really encouraging people to stay indoors. I know you'll probably hear this on Thursday, so it might be a moot point by then. But in case in case it's still lingering, just so you know what's going on today.
And this will go out this afternoon, but some people don't listen to it the next day, so that's a good point. Also want to let folks know that you can check out online the story between Shane Mack and the library. District Councilman, Parish Councilman Shane Mack is going to lay off the library for the time being, at least their millage. We'll see if he returns there later. So, with all that being said, we've kind of covered. Oh, one last thing before I forget, before we move into sports. Congressman Garrett Graves did visit the border. He talked about a few interesting points as he was down there. You can check out the videos of his visit as well as a story at www.livingstonparishnews.com. It is also the stretch board at the bottom of the front page of this Thursday's paper. So getting into the nuts and bolts of today's show, we're going to start with Rob. Kind of a lot of baseball news coming out. Your stories this week were mostly about all parish MVPs and coaches, but we also have an official confirmation of a coaching change at Denham, so take it away.
That is correct. It's Wednesday morning. Coach Brett Beard sent an email out this morning about, I guess, around 6:30 or so. Just 6:17 a.m. I'm looking at it right now. This was this morning, Wednesday morning. They officially named Trave Hopkins, their new head coach. He'll take over for Mark Carroll. I talked with Coach Hopkins a little bit this morning, and he said all the ingredients are in place for the program to be successful. He said Coach Carroll's kind of laid a foundation there, and he just wants to continue it and kind of make it a little bit better.
So that that kind of keeps, I guess you could say, keeps a little continuity around the program, because he right. In the interim he was the coach for the summer league. Correct?
He's been in charge of the program since since we learned that Coach Carroll wasn't going to come back. He mentioned that one thing that he's doing this summer with the program, they've been able to divide up into multiple teams, which is getting some of these younger kids more reps, and he's able to kind of observe and see what they're doing in game situations a little bit more. And it's kind of helped him kind of develop a thing, kind of a program with the guys. He also said they're getting into the weight room. He said that was one thing that when they looked at things, they wanted to get their kids a little bit bigger, faster, stronger type deal. And he said they're starting their weight program this week.
Okay.
How long have you talked to him? I was wondering, just my initial reaction. I haven't read your story yet, but that must be pretty intimidating to step into the shoes of a guy who's been at the program for as long as Coach Carroll was.
I just, when I talked to him, I said, I know you want to put your stamp, and he kind of said it's not about me at all. He said it's more about the kids and getting them where they need to be and getting the program where it needs to be. And now, the good part of it is, I guess, for them is lots of young kids coming up. So that's a lot to work with. A lot of kids coming back, and like I said, I think they hit 5 sophomore starters in that playoff game there. So, and all of those guys are coming back, of course.
Sure, and I know that Coach Beard said that he expects within a short amount of time for the program to be a contender year in and year out. So is that kind of the vibe you got from the coach as you spoke to him?
Yeah. It's just one of those things. He's he's ready to go. He looks at the community and everything, and he said he's talk with different people, and one of the things he also stresses that like to get some more community student involvement with the program, and that's one of the things he kind of, I don't want to say harped on, but he just kind of mentioned like to get more of that going with the program.
Gotcha. Well, it's going to be interesting to see because, there's a lot of teams working out over the summer, but I guess you call it the bond renewal, that construction has been fast-tracked. It's still supposed to start this summer.
Right.
Did he make any comment about potential new facilities?
Didn't talk to him about that. For me, it was just kind of laying the foundation, saying, hey, here we are. I've talked to him before in the dugouts, just around the games and things like that, but this was our first real conversation where we just kind of sat down and as I was driving making my way to the office this morning. So
gotcha. So that will be or he will be the new coach at Denham Springs High School. Talking about all parish honors this year, we had some interesting, a lot of times you can kind of tell who's going to end up in those top spots, but we had a little bit of late surge for some folks later in the season that pushed some new faces, I guess you can call it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So the MVPs wound up with co-MVPs this year, and both of these guys are well deserving in their own rights. And when we had the meeting, it's kind of, Coach Sanderford threw out Caleb Webb, and you just shake your head and you go, yeah, I can see that. And then Coach Castello filled in for Coach Cassard at Live Oak, and he said Blaze Priester, and you go, yeah, I can see that. So you kind of looked around, you guys okay with co-MVPs? Are we good? And the consensus was yes, just in what these guys were able to do during the season. Just in talking to Blaze, he had come on and he was having a really good season coming on, kind of making a name for himself as a junior, and then, everything gets shut down with COVID. And he kind of started a little slow in this season. So, I said, what happened? And he said, it's going to sound weird, but I just sat down in the mirror and looked at myself one day and said, you got to do better, man. And so it was just one of those things where he said, you just kind of get patient. You kind of slow things down a little bit. And once they got to district, he kind of turned it on a little bit. And he's able to, and Coach Cassard is expecting him, just in the people he's talked to be a pretty high draft pick in the Major League Draft later this summer.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
Who was the last MLB draft pick coming out of here? Do you know?
Shoot, I know Mac, and I want to say Swaggerty, maybe.
Okay.
Travis Swaggerty, if I remember correctly. That's been a couple of years, I believe.
And Swaggerty, Pittsburgh picked him up, didn't they?
If I remember correctly, yes.
That just sounds familiar.
Yes.
So but I mean, when you think about those names, those are people that a lot of people have heard of, have known, continued. Actually, I think both Travis and Mac both decided to go the college route first, did they not? Mac ended up at Southeastern, and Travis ended up at LSU A?
I think it was South Alabama, maybe?
That's right. Yeah.
So,
going to be interesting to see what those kids do going forward. How about Coach?
I wanted to mention Caleb Webb too. Caleb from Walker. It was he had the hitting part going down, and the thing for him was the pitching. Kind of unexpected, and Coach Sanderford at Walker said it was kind of one of those things where he kind of like, don't know if I really want to pitch, but then he kind of gets into it. And I asked him, I was like, when did you know he kind of turned that corner and said, okay, I'm all in? He said, when we got to that point in the season where he goes, who am I pitching against next? When's my next start? What are we doing? And so the mentality kind of switched for him, and he said his thing's like nothing fancy. I'm just going up there to throw strikes and, get people out. And that's pretty much it,
Sure. Well, that's the big thing, right? When you're pitching, you got to throw strikes.
Throw strikes. My son pitches. That's what I tell him all the time. Just throw strikes, dude.
So, moving over to the coaching side.
This one was kind of one of those no-brainers too, where you got two coaches who bring their teams to the state tournament, and you can't take one over the other. So we had Coach Sanderford at Walker, and Coach Beatty at Doyle. And so for both of them, just in talking to Coach Sandifer is really interesting. Talking about the approach, they started 9-0, and he said that's really when your baseball program. That's really when you make that key run to kind of set yourself up in the power rankings. They were sitting top 10 all year, and once they got there, he said once you start going, it's one of those deals where you're not going to really move a whole lot. So that early start was really key for them, and it's key for everybody, really. And then at the end of the year, they went on that run. They had that. I don't know. You guys remember that the week before the last week of the season, it poured rain.
Right.
Nobody played, so that final week, everybody was scrambling to get games, or at least it seemed like. And I think they played, if I remember right, they played 6 games in 7 days, I believe.
That's a lot of baseball.
And they crunched it all in, made a little run there. But he, talking to him, I said, did that really help y'all? He goes, yeah, really, it was, because at that point they had, I think, lost 3 or 4, 2 to Live Oak and 1 to Central, and it's kind of like you hit the reset button and you're kind of able to start back over. The other part, he said when they get to the playoffs, some of those, they get that first round win against Estrahan, Live Oak loses, and he said that kind of cleared. He said, let's be honest, facing Live Oak, that would have been another challenge, a challenge in itself, and in a series, 2 or 3 series. But things just kind of, I said, sometimes you got to have things kind of fall your way. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's not stuff on the field, it's stuff that happens around you,
Sure.
So, for Coach Beatty, it was for that team, and I've said this before, I mean, the main goal for them was to get back to Sulphur and win the whole thing, and it's one of those deals where they dealt with some injuries early in the year, and if you didn't know, maybe you didn't know, because they just kept trucking along. They hit a little patch in the road there, and they were waiting to get the baseball players or basketball players back, which
right.
They had a lot of those guys who were key parts of that deal, but they just he said with the injuries and things, we could have just said, oh, poor us, but the guys who filled in for those guys who were hurt, they stepped up and did what they were supposed to do. And eventually you get to where you're going. And, you get down to it, and going into the, heading into the playoffs or heading into the tournament, they had a 50-inning scoreless streak.
Wow.
Which is really, you think about it, and Lauraville scored they broke it, scored a run in the first inning in that semifinal game, and kind of broke that up. But it was Coach Beatty kind of summed it up and put it into perspective. They give up 2 runs in the playoffs, and they wind up as a state runner-up. Normally you'd look at that and go, hey man, we should be state champions. But
yeah.
That's the way it works.
That's baseball.
It's baseball. I mean, that's legitimately for both of those coaches. When I started the post-game interview, looked at Coach Sandifer, I was like, that's baseball.
Yeah.
And same thing with Coach Beatty. It's baseball. I don't, and it's good baseball too. There's nothing that anybody, you look back and there's nothing anybody did wrong, or, you second guess or anything like that. It was just good baseball.
Right. So, check those out in this Thursday's paper. You can check them out online. All of those stories about coaches and players. So we're going to be moving over to Mr. David Gray. We're going to be talking about a couple of news issues before we get into. Well, you know what? First, let's break it up before we get into the monotony of the news. Mr. Lane Hardy, who was on a national tour, I believe.
Yes.
Cut it up to come back to Lake Charles to put on a concert benefit for. I mean, Lake Charles is just they've had it. They have had a rough go of it over the past year. Hurricane Laura last year in 2020 was terrible, and of course they were dealing with COVID just like everybody else. Plus they had flooding just a few weeks ago. So he came back to give a concert benefit. You had a chance to run over there, take some pictures, kind of hang out. How was that?
I mean, it was a good time. I mean, there was a few hundred people out there. It was a really hot day, so I was surprised there was as many people out there. But I guess it beats the rain that we had the previous week. It had been storming all week in South Louisiana. But like you said, it was to benefit flood. Not just flood victims, but people who have just dealt with so much. I mean, like you said, 2 hurricanes, COVID, the ice storm. Then Lake Charles got the worst rain, or the second worst rain it's ever gotten on record, just a month ago. or yeah, just a month now, and so yeah, I mean Lake Charles has just had it. So Lane performed there. This is one of during this nationwide tour that's going on and until through 20 or into 2022. He only has 2 dates in Louisiana. So this was the first one in Louisiana. He has another one in Gonzales, I believe, in August. So yeah, it was just and you kind of forget how like popular he is. There was, I mean, you could because he's not he's not in our faces like it was during the Idol mania. Idol mania. I mean that was just a crazy time when every day it seemed like something was going on with Lane Hardy's, and it's kind of a little more seems subdued now. But I mean the fans still come out. I mean that right in front of the stage. I remember there was a bunch of obviously people from Livingston Parish mostly. I mean, they were in their Lane Hardy shirts and everything. And then, but at one point, they had some of the organizers talking to the crowd, and some of those people came from Michigan and Ohio. I mean, that just blew me away that people from that far away drove all the way to South Louisiana. I mean, literally from the top of the country to the bottom of the country, just seeing Lane Hardy perform. And, so that was pretty cool to see that. And then Lane, he's still, the thing that amazes me, he still seems like the same kid. I first talked to him when he was 17 years old. Before, because people, remember he went on Idol twice. And, I talked to him the first time before he had ever, actually been on national television. I talked to him then, and he still seems like the same shy kid. So I mean, it kind of amazes me that that Southern boy quality that they talk about. What one of the reasons why they believe he won that show is still there. So he also talked about he played a lot of his original songs, and he also mentioned his album, which so people who want to get Lane Hardy's music, an official album. It's been a couple years that they've been talking about that. He says it should be coming out at sometime at the end of this year. He said the fall, but you never know with that stuff. So I just said sometime this year. So that could be all the way through December. Who knows? But he did say it should be coming out this year. So that's the latest on the Lane Hardy front.
And he seems to have a lot going on, but it is interesting about those kids from the country. Sometimes they stay kids from the country, There's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, it's got to be impressive considering how many, because these days you really are able to see how, I don't want to use that word. I was about to say rabid, but just how dedicated your fans are because of social media, because of constant interaction, because you see all that. So in the wake of all that, for a kid like that to kind of stay with his roots and stay humble is very impressive.
Yeah.
So any more news that we have on Lane Hardy, of course, we will pass along to you guys as it comes out. So talking about the news, I know, boring. We have sort of we've had a couple of weeks of Dennis and Cynthia Perkins news that I know you're going to kind of wrap up today. And we are expecting a hearing next week on a potential continuance, which I know the state will challenge. So kind of bring us up to date on everything.
Yeah, well, the latest on the Dennis and Cynthia Perkins front is a judge denied Dennis Perkins's request to have separate trials, and that's been it's been kind of a sticking point for Dennis Perkins's defense. They believe that Cynthia Perkins will basically, her testimony will sort of point the finger at Dennis. That was a phrase that his attorney used, point the finger, and basically put him as the mastermind, if you will, against for all these crimes. So that was the point of that was the point of the recent ruling. Judge Erica Sledge, she ruled against that. They were since they were indicted together, they faced like we all know 150 total crimes, some pretty heinous crimes, I guess you could say, and so as of right now, they are going to go to trial together, and this week, and we'll have a story up in next week's paper about this. It'll be the day before their hearing to determine whether or not they'll have a continuance. That hearing is on June 25th, but the day before that, we'll have a story that Dennis Perkins's attorney has since appealed the judge's ruling. So we'll wait to see what comes from that appeal. But I mean, as of right now, the trial is set to start July 12th, which is less than a month away. And I mean, this has been going on since October 2019. So I mean, this has been a story that if you're in Livingston Parish, you know Dennis and Cynthia Perkins, you know those names now. So I mean, hopefully we're working towards a resolution, but without the courts go, especially with COVID, how that just delayed everything. This is still dragging on, and so we'll see what the judge's decision is on the appeal for a separate trial and her decision on a continuance next week. And like you said, the state, the prosecutors, they have announced, during the hearing earlier this month, they said they will definitely oppose any sort of continuance. They said this has been, it's already been delayed a year. So that is the state's position on that.
Okay. And so we will be looking forward to getting the word next week on whether or not a judge will allow a continuance. As David mentioned, the state will challenge that. A bit of unfortunate news. I covered him for a brief time while he was at the parish council. He decided to only stay in for one term. He then passed it on. Gerald McMorris won that race for District 6. And we're talking about Jeff Averett. He came in as a big group of guys that completely replaced the entire council before them, trying to get some new things done. Unfortunately, Mr. Averett passed, and David, you were gracious enough to follow up on that, so tell us what you learned.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're going to have a bigger story in next week's paper, but yeah, Mr. Averett, he passed away last Tuesday, and I guess the thing, I spoke with his daughter earlier this week, Madison, and one of the things she, kind of said was he was just, and this is something that will be in the feature next week, he was just a very personable guy. And like I said, I mean, that was, you covered him. I never met him, never covered him. That was, when I was still mostly lifestyle. So he was a very personable guy. She mentioned how one story that stuck out to her was how when they went to Disney World one year, and they went to Disney World, and randomly there was like 2 or 3 people that he, in Disney World, one of the biggest, most, you got tourists from all over the world there. He met people he knew, like that somehow he just, as she said, anywhere they went, he knew somebody there, and the people would love him, come up to him, give him a big hug, all that. And so that was just one thing that stood out, was just how he was very liked. And she said, kind of amazed her with after the news broke that he had passed, the amount of people that have reached out to her and her mother. It was a small family. It was Mr. Averett, his wife, and his daughter. So very, very tight, very close knit. But the amount of people that have reached out, and she said they had to bring to their house after the funeral, which was last Friday, 4 truckloads of flowers. That's just how many people reached out. I mean, 4 truck beds full of flowers. I mean, that just kind of shows you the, from a visual perspective, just the amount of people that felt compelled enough to do, to reach out to the family in some way, and so Madison said that's kind of given her, a little bit of peace about it. I mean, obviously, you never get over the loss of a parent. I mean, it's something that takes years to be able to, get through. I mean, much less, never get over. But that has given her some peace knowing that he was so loved by the community. And like you said, he served on the term on the parish council. And she said because he wanted to help. He grew up in Collier. He's a native, lifelong resident, lives in the parish, and he wanted to help people. So, I mean, that just kind of shows what kind of man he was. And he loved hunting. So that was the other little part. He loved nothing more than like taking the hound dogs out to go. He had really gotten into hunting hogs lately, she said.
I was about to say he was a hound hunter, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So David will be able to touch on all those points in next week's story. We'll probably talk a little bit more about some specifics when that comes around. Last but certainly not least, want to remind folks that the session has ended. Actually, this is not last. I know David has some news about Moderna, but this struck me as we were talking about government. The legislative session has ended. We do have a bill wrap on our website. We also will be meeting with our representatives from Livingston Parish over the next couple of weeks. They'll be coming in to do podcasts, so please keep an eye out for that. So, to wrap the show up today, David, give us a little bit of update on Moderna, who I believe is trying to push for full vaccination status as opposed to emergency status.
The latest news with them is they're trying to do what Pfizer did, which was push their emergency authorization use to 12-year-olds. They're trying to basically to just be able to be the second vaccine, because right now Pfizer is the only vaccine that has received their emergency authorization use for people under the age of 18. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson can only be 18 in order to take those. So Moderna last week, they filed for that, and you should have some news coming up on that like this week. We'll be waiting to hear, and if it's if the pass is any indicator, the Louisiana Department of Health, they will follow whatever recommendations that the CDC and FDA have given. So if both of those entities, they approve the emergency authorization use for Moderna to be used for kids 12 and up, then LDH will, most likely follow with those recommendations. And it's just another way to get more children vaccinated, because that, obviously they were the last group to be approved for vaccination, and there's only one vaccine that's available for them. But, that group has, of all the age groups in Louisiana that have been vaccinated, there, obviously the least amount. I think it's less than 2.5% of all vaccinations in the state are for people 17 and younger, and then like 1.5% that have completed it. So that's an age group that they say really they want to get more vaccinations with, because that even though younger children are more they're not as susceptible to COVID, they can still act as carriers, and get them back in school next year to hopefully have a regular school year next year. They're really hoping to get more kids vaccinated. So that's the latest on that front. And Ochsner Health, they've started some trials with the Pfizer vaccine for kids 5 to 11 to get that eligibility age a little bit lower. So that's kind of the latest news on the COVID front.
We haven't gotten away from it yet, folks.
Not yet.
But as I'm sure people can tell, the news cycle on it is slowing down. Still getting some new cases every day, so please keep an eye out for that. And please try to go get vaccinated. I know that Louisiana is lagging behind other places in the country. So without further ado, we're going to wrap it up with an introduction. We're going to start with the man that just spoke. On my right, go ahead.
This is David Gray, lifestyle editor with the Livingston Parish News.
And on my left.
Hey, this is Rob DeArmond, sports editor with the Livingston Parish News.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us today for the Livingston Parish News weekly show called Group Therapy. It's where the three of us sit down and talk about what's going on in Livingston Parish. We want to remind folks that we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we will see you guys next time.